Hello, I'm Kelly Rimmer. This is my friend Lisa Ireland. We were just having a bit of a chat about our writing process, and it kind of occurred to us that, hang on a sec, this might be something that other people might be interested in. So we're just here today it's going to be a bit of a rambly chat. When we chat, we tend to ramble, and this will probably be the most unprofessional video you watch all day. But if you're an aspiring writer or even someone who's interested in the way that books are produced, this might be of interest to you. So hello again, Lisa.
Hi, Cal. How are you going?
I am well, thank you. So, your most recent book is The Secret Life of Shirley Sullivan, and my most recent book is Truths I Never Told You. And they are vastly different, but at the end of the day, they're both books. Both have this historical aspect to them, both commercial women's fiction. But the way that we produce them could not be more different. Is that fair to say?
It's amazingly different. I think we're almost at the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of what we do when we start out to write a new book. So, like when you first started Truths I Never Told You, let's talk about that book specifically at the moment. What was the first thing you did? Like, you had the idea for it, obviously. So let's not go back into inspiration and that far back. But you had the idea. You knew you wanted to write about the topic, and you had kind of this idea. Where did you start when you wanted to start writing? What's the first thing that you do?
So that it all starts actually with this particular book, right at the idea. I had the idea, and then I was out walking the dogs. And so I kind of raced home to write an outline. And in this case, it's a little bit unique. It's not normally such a fast process, but I wrote the outline for that book in about 40 minutes. And that outline is exactly what the book ends up being in my case. So it follows, I mean, often it takes a bit more time and a bit of polishing and a bit of, I might change my plan. But in this case, that 40-minute period did produce the entire story, I guess. I've then got to write it, but it followed that pattern exactly. But that's not how you work at all, is it?
No. I never know what's going to happen. So I have an idea, as in something that I want to write about. So with Shirley Sullivan, I had the idea of, I'd read an article about an elderly couple escaping from their nursing home in the States, and I thought that was a really novel idea because they were on the run. It wasn't that they'd wandered off. It was a deliberate act where they were running to something, and I often wondered where it was they were running to. So I wanted to write about that concept, but I had really no idea where the story would take me, and I didn't ever write an outline. There was a historical aspect to the story as well, like there is in your book. It's present day story, and then the couple in the story met in the early 1960s. So I went back and traced their marriage from the day that they met right through until the two storylines actually collide. But I didn't, even in the backstory, which I had to do a lot of research for, I just started writing it. Like I didn't even have a proper ending in mind. I knew for the male character, I knew what would happen to him, but the female character, who's the lead, she's Shirley of the title, didn't know what would happen to her. I knew she had a secret, but I didn't know what the secret was. So it all starts with character for me, and this is going to sound a bit airy-fairy, and I'm not an airy-fairy person at all.
No, you're not.
But it's kind of like the characters lead me in the first draft, at least. Like I'm much more manipulative once I get into the second draft. But in the first draft, I kind of let the characters take me on their story. It's like they tell me where to go. Whereas you've already crafted what's going to happen to those poor little things. You've already done the mean stuff to them in the outline. So when you say an outline, how detailed would that outline be?
I actually have one here because up until this morning, I'm waiting for edits on a book. So I was loath to pack up my office because I know the book's coming back kind of any day. But this morning I just got sick of the mess because I did all of the walls of my office were kind of filled with bits of paper and photos and different things that I used to inspire me, and the outline. So this is the outline for my 2021 book, and it's 6 pages like this. And this is
Can you read me a paragraph? Read me like just
all right.
any paragraph you like, but read so that I can see what sort of details in there.
Okay. So spoiler alert, now you'll know what next year's book is about, but I won't tell you what actually happened. Okay. So Emilia Slaska is a headstrong, curious 13-year-old Polish girl. She's living as Emilia Dziak with her adoptive parents, Truda and Matthias, in an apartment owned by his uncle in the Aryan side of Warsaw, adjacent to the Jewish ghetto. After fleeing Sabina in the wake of her brother's death, Emilia begins to subtly rebel. Since the war began, she's lost her entire family in her home and she's furious. So in this case, I'm like, for my own benefit, I'm kind of setting the scene. Yeah. And then I kind of get into plot. So, I've got another setting paragraph here, which explains her scenario. And then I start talking about the opening scene of the book. The one thing in this book, I did end up adding there's a kind of a prologue, which I didn't have in the outline.
Right.
But really, it's like that all the way through. So each sentence or, a run of a few sentences tends to become a scene. In this case, the opening scene in Emilia's storyline. So
wow,
that's what it looks like, page upon page. And I do this thing here, see, where I've got like notes. So there's a part of this particular book which doesn't have a title yet. It's kind of semi-based around Irena Sendler, who was this Polish woman who rescued children from the Jewish ghetto, and Emilia and one of her friends kind of are adjacent to that team. And so for my benefit and for my editor's benefit, when I send this off, because it also becomes my proposal, I've got a comment with a hyperlink to the Wikipedia page for Irena Sendler. And then I will just now this is where it gets interesting, I think. So I then take this and I move basically this into Scrivener and chunk it down into scenes, which I then just fill in. And I don't fill it in chronologically. I just I kind of start at the beginning, and then when I get stuck, I might skip a scene or 10 scenes. Sometimes if I'm really stuck, I'll move to the next really kind of intense emotional high point, because I find that re-energizes me about the story. And so I fill it in kind of bit by bit, and I don't write kind of from chapter 1 to the end. So how about you? What do you do? Hang
on. You're not getting away with that. So, first of all, do you ever deviate, or do you often, let's not say ever, but do you often deviate from what's in that quite detailed outline? Do you ever deviate?
Well, yes, like in this case, I didn't plan the prologue, and then in my research came across this idea that I knew the book had to open with it. So that may end up just being called chapter 1, but my original intention was that Emilia would open the book rather than the other character.
And in that outline, is it that detailed that it's broken up into chapters?
No, but it kind of does function that way because of the way I break the sentences up for the Scrivener scenes. And so I do chapters very last, like for me. And in this case, it is 2 points of view. It's entirely historic. There's no contemporary timeline, but there are 2 points of view. And so I write them kind of, in pieces, like I was describing in terms of the chronology of it. But I do the chapters. Really, I could submit the book to my editor with no chapters put in a sense, because the chapters, the flow of the story, the chapters aren't a big part of how the story flows for me. It ends up being more about where the points of view break up. And so sometimes, a character might have 2 or 3 chapters where they're narrating before it moves to the other one. Yeah. And I kind of have an idea how that's going to look when I'm writing this outline. Sometimes I will go as detailed as I have done outlines before. I'm pretty sure my editor hates getting proposals from me. But sometimes I'll have Emilia will do this part, and then I'll have Sergius will do this part, and then I'll break it up to that level in the outline that is effectively my plan. Okay, your turn. So what's happening for you?
Before I start that, I just want to clarify for listeners. So you write your outline, and you write that wherever you write it, in Word or wherever, and then you transpose each little scene chunk into a separate, I don't understand Scrivener, so I'm going to get this bit wrong, but is it a Scrivener
It's a scrivening. It's a scrivening. So it's like a little. It's basically a scene. Each scene gets its own little
and
chunk.
then you've got the option to move those around if you want to later on. So you would worry about chapters and that sort of thing. Like you would just write all the scenes out for, like, you know, in your first draft. You just go ahead, you'd write all the scenes, and you wouldn't necessarily do it in order. And you might then, am I right in saying you might move scenes around at the end to make the flow better? Am I interpreting that right?
Yes, particularly the breakdown between 2 points of view. So if it makes sense for this, you know, generally though, what's in the outline, it will generally follow that exact flow. It's just sometimes one scene that I intended actually ends up being 2 or 3. You know, you think, oh, this will just start and finish in this room, and then it eventuates as you're writing it that actually, no, I need to give a little bit more before or a little bit more after, so I'm adding scenes.
Yeah.
And because I'm quite waffly, this will shock you, especially anyone watching this video. But sometimes I plan, you know, a part. I think, oh, this section's going to need 10 scenes, and then I get in there and start writing and realize, like, oh goodness, that's overblown. I can actually do that in one. You know, so I might simplify it or I might expand it. But it's generally, I mean, that book, which is, you know, it ends the way that it says it's going to end. You know, so yeah.
See, I feel like a bit of fraud here, because I feel like this is like you're an aspiring author, and I've been doing these little mentoring videos to my and leaving them on my YouTube channel and posting them on Facebook, and I just did one on process yesterday, actually, just this short little you know, just tasty bites, really. And one of the things I said is that, and I really need to take my own advice here. This is a case where I don't take my own advice, but my advice was that no one can tell you how to write your book, and that there's no one right way to do it, that whatever feels good for you and what gets the work done is the right process. But I was just about to say, which is dangerous, so if you're an aspiring author, just ignore this, but when I talk to other authors like this, I do, even now after 6 published books, which is not a million, but it's 6, you know, I've 6 published books, I still get this sort of squirmy feeling that I'm somehow doing it wrong, you know, that I'm not, because I do the complete opposite to that. So I have these notebooks.
Oh, that's pretty.
Beautiful typo notebooks, and I write. This is my very scientific. This is the new. I wish I had the Shirley one, but I don't think I have it handy. So, hang on, I might have. Just hang on 1 second, because if I've got the Shirley one. No, I haven't. I do have a notebook for a book that I wrote 40,000 words of. Actually, I might pull that one out, because this is one that didn't work. But so in all of them, this is another one that didn't work. I start off really with characters and a little bit of backstory. Often this stuff doesn't even end up in the book. I'm just telling myself about the character, or the character's telling me about themselves. So in this one, this is the book that I'm writing now. There's 2 characters, she was called Claire when I started off. I just realised that. I've got this, I'm thinking, who's Claire? Her name has changed, so her name's now Jane. So there's 2 characters. One's a middle-aged woman and one is an older protagonist. So I've just reading this now. I wrote this ages ago, and I haven't used any of this in the book so far, and I'm like 35,000 words into the book. But this is all about Jane's backstory, how she met her husband. It just informs who she is for me. So I know a lot about her. And then the other character is Dolly. I did the same for her. I wrote all about Dolly's childhood, what she's done through. So she's an elderly lady who's in her 80s. So I've done all this work on where Dolly came from, even a little bit of work on what her ancestry is, like who her father was, who her mum was, you know, stuff like that. Some of that will actually come out in the novel, but a lot of it won't. It just tells me who the people are that I'm writing about. And then I feel like if I know them really well, I know how they'll react in any situation, and I know what they would do, what they wouldn't do, and I kind of just let them tell me their story. So I kind of know what this is about. I've got my outline, I can tell you, like, I can give you the log line, which sometimes I write this first because it helps me. Well, this is like your back cover blurb, and the back cover blurb that I'm working on or working with at the moment is it says, hang on, just let me think. I can't. 2 heartbroken mothers, 2 lost sons. Will an unlikely friendship heal them all, or can an unlikely friendship heal them all? And so, I mean, that's not perfect. It's just like that won't go on the back cover. That's just for my head to go, okay, what at the heart of this book, what is this book about?
And you know what you're writing towards. I think that's really good tip if you write in the way that you do, where the characters unfold the way that they naturally, evolve to. If you have a recentering point, like something to remind you of what the story is actually about, it keeps you on track so you don't end up, because we all have I think most good writers, of which I'm including both of us, but most writers who tell a powerful story, I think, tend to have a lot of stuff that doesn't make it into the story. There's so much else, and it can be really difficult to determine what goes in and what comes out. But if you know that at the end of the day, what you're actually trying to tell is that story about 2 mothers, 2 lost sons, you have something that helps you filter.
Yeah. And exactly. And so I think I've always got a story that I want to tell, like, as in, I don't know what happens in the story, but I know what I want to say. I know what the feels are, I guess. And I often don't know how it will end. This one, strangely, I do. So that's actually helpful when you know how it ends. But I often don't. But what I was going to say about my process is that's different from yours is that I do generally, even when I'm writing dual timeline, I write the book as it unfolds. Because I haven't got a plan, I'm telling myself the story in the first draft. So I write chapter 1, chapter 2. If it's multiple point of view, which it often is, I write one person's point of view, and then I write, chapter 1, Kelly, chapter 2, Lisa, and I go out of Kelly's point of view and into Lisa's point of view so I write it exactly as it ends up, in structure-wise, in the end product. Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes a chapter might get moved around or inserted. I might have to massage it a bit. That happened a bit with my last book, which is The Art of Friendship. I had a few scenes that I needed to insert later on, which meant that the chapters needed to be massaged into a different order. That doesn't generally happen. I generally just write chapter 1, blah, 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 chapter 2, blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously lots of editing has to happen. It's a very, very, very messy first draft. But I don't do that thing. I wrote my first book, I wrote the way you just described, not with the outlining, unfortunately, so that would have made it a lot easier. But I wrote it in scenes, and I wrote the scenes as they came to me, and I ended up with all these scenes at the end, which became chapters, and then I sort of massaged them into some sort of a story. It was very stressful for me. I don't know actually how I did it. But 6 books, I've written 6 books, and each one my process has been a little bit different. I have done the outlining thing before. It doesn't work for me. Like 2 books have been outlined. One was Feels Like Home, and the other one was The Art of Friendship, which I described in a video last night as like giving birth to a pineapple, writing that book.
That's a very subtle analogy there, Lisa.
So difficult. So difficult to write. And I think for me, I panic when I feel like I have to stick to, like, I get a, like, claustrophobic feeling when I've got, like, I know lots of writers that I talk to actually feel comfort in the, you know, a sort of like a safety net in having the outline. They know they can do it because there's the outline and now they just have to write it. Whereas for me, it's like I feel like it's like constricts me and I I lose my creativity. And as you know, I was writing a book very recently that I had a strong outline for. And the reason that I had a strong outline for was because the publisher had wanted to see it. And so I'd sent off this quite long synopsis, well, not long by your standards, Kelly, but long by mine. So a 2-page synopsis, which is quite detailed for me. And almost immediately I lost interest in writing the book because I felt like well, that's done now. I've worked out what happens. I'm not really that interested in writing this anymore. But I kept sort of slogging away, and then I got to about 30,000 words and I thought, I just hate this book. I just can't. Whereas, so I sat down to start something new, which is the book that I just described, and that has just flowed. I mean, no book ever flows like, you know, that sounds like it's easy, but comparatively it's gone quite well. And I think it's because I'm excited to write it because I don't really know what happens. So I was going to ask you, every single book has been the same? Like, not, are you like,
no. So I think as with you, my process has evolved. So my first book I wrote really was by the seat of my pants. I kind of had this scenario that I liked the idea of, like what became my first book. So I'd written lots of other stories that never kind of have seen the light of day and will never see the light of day. The one that ended up, yeah, it's part of it, isn't it? You have to be willing to throw out as many words as you throw out because every word's taught you something, but they're still worth doing even if they don't get published.
Yeah.
So what became Me Without You just started with this scenario that I had seen happen at the Ferry Wharf in Sydney, and I thought I was writing a happy ending romance when I started that book, and that is not what happened. It is a love story. But the process of that was I wrote that book and then sat on my hard drive for more than 10 years. So it was, and in the time after that, I did. I wrote that book in my early 20s. It wasn't published till I was like 34, I think, 35. But you know, in the interim, I would go to it and refine it. I really did probably write at least 1 million words before I was published, and nearly all of them I trashed. So
well, they're not.
And they were terrible. But that's kind of how I learnt. So I'd write and edit, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm done with that now. In the bin it goes. But the book that became Me Without You was a novella. It was quite short, and I was surprised by the ending, and then I submitted it, and then it got picked up and they wanted it longer, and so made a few changes to it, you know, in the editing process. And that kind of taught me how, because the novella followed the same plot that the novel follows. So really all I did was expand on it. And that worked really well for me. But it took me a few more books to learn that that's how my brain works. So I wrote The Secret Daughter, and the edits on it were intense. It was such a mess, and I had such a great editor at the time. But I did not know what I was writing to. You know how you were saying about your log line? Yeah. I didn't have anything like that, and I didn't understand yet that that would have probably helped if I was going to keep pantsing, flying by the seat of my pants.
That's a good tip, you know, just interrupting you, sorry. There.
Yeah, go for it.
Every book that I always ask, when I'm working with aspiring authors, I always ask them to describe their book to me in 1 or 2 lines if they can. And what I've found for me is and I don't know if this is just a personal thing, I'll be interested in your take on this, is that if I can do that, if I can say it's about 2 heartbroken mothers, 2 lost sons, and a friendship that comes out of this, like if I can just very quickly and succinctly say that, surely it's about a woman who steals her 80-year-old husband from a nursing home and takes him on the trip of a lifetime. If I, you know, and to atone for a dark secret in her past, you know, if I can do that, I can write the book really, like the book. If I can't do it, and I couldn't The Art of Friendship, I would say, well, it's about 2 friends, and that, you know, like it took me a long time before I got to drill down to what the essence of that book is. And so I think that's what you're saying. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but and that you won't get there in the end. But it's much easier to write a book where you've got that thing that you're writing to, that you center.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that I suspect that's probably fairly universal. You know, even if you are letting it unfold in front of you, you will, if you want to keep it a clean narrative that is paced right, I think you need to know what it is that you're writing to. Even if you don't know what the scene looks like at the end, you have to know what the book's about, because otherwise you will end up putting all of that lovely backstory that you've spent hours and hours meditating on that does not need to be in the book. It just helps you understand the character. Your book will be 50,000 words too long, says the woman who's cut 45,000 words or something from the first draft of the book I've just submitted. I know this from experience.
But that's a really good point, and it's something for aspiring authors to know, is that it's okay if you do that in your, like when you're learning. If you do end up with a draft that's 120,000 words and you have to go back and cut afterwards, that's okay too. But it's more efficient not to have to do it. So, but it's all part of the learning process. I mean, I didn't know what needed in the beginning when I was first writing. I didn't really know what was essential to the story and what wasn't. I still overwrite some scenes. I still put too much in, but I'm much better at knowing what can be taken out now when I go back and read it and like, oh, you've said that 3 times. Whereas you know, in the beginning I couldn't see that. So the other thing, Kelly, is what about 2 things. I've got all these questions. I'm picking your brain today. What about research? When do you do the research for the book? Do you do it beforehand? Do you do it while you're writing, after the first draft, or just when do you do it?
All of the above. So I'm reading at the moment for a story that I've got the first like 2 pages of the outline done, but I don't know where the story goes. So it's a long way from being submitted to my editor as a proposal, because I won't submit it till I know. So I'm doing a bit of research to understand the setting and the context, and it's set somewhere near me, so I'm going to go visit there and just see if I can unstick the part that I'm stuck on. So it starts, but this is fairly general research. I'm not going to go interview someone, or I won't invest too much time. If in another few weeks I haven't nutted out the plot, I will put this aside and move on to another idea and come back to it probably next year or the year after or whenever. Then once I get the okay from my editor, that's when I really intensively start researching. And so then there's a period.
You start researching before you start writing?
Oh, yes. So because I like gaps in my drafts. I like to feel like there's some momentum. So I'll start writing the first chapter maybe, or the 10th chapter or whatever, and I use like little angle brackets, and I'll put like insert scene here when you understand how XYZ works.
Yeah.
And then I'll be in a particular mood, so I might want to watch that documentary or make that phone call or whatever it happens to be. And so then I can fill in some of those gaps and then come back and actually write the scenes.
Yeah.
And I have found this is another learning thing, but when I first started writing these really research-intensive books, I would get really stuck on the details, and that would bog me down. And so in terms of like making the story feel paced well for me, because when I overwrite every single time, still do, haven't figured out how not to do it, but I need to kind of feel like this, like I need a momentum behind the words coming out, if you know what I mean. So I'll put those little angle brackets, and then I'll say, figure out what style of fashion would have been, in the era or whatever, and then I can come back to that later. And sometimes I'll keep like a research log of things that I do need to go off and figure out. But it's really messy. My process is messy from start to finish. So
mine too. I think everyone's is, like, seriously.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Different mess, but no one's, because let's face it, no one sits down and writes a perfect draft or a near perfect draft the first time. We're all in flux all the time, and it takes a team in the end to get it over the line at a publisher. So whether you're self-publishing or whether you're traditionally published, it still takes a team of people.
It really does
to get it up to publishable standard, I guess.
So Lisa, can you tell me, you've got your draft done, you've got to the end and it's all done. What happens then for you? Is that like, are you doing now multiple iterations of it, or do you send it off to someone to read?
I do lots of drafts, not as many as some people, but so I don't know what, I guess, I've heard of people doing like 30 and 40 drafts, a million drafts. But I guess it's what you call a draft. too.
Yeah.
Like, I will call it first draft, really, until I'm happy to see it for someone else to look at it. But I might have gone over it 6 or 7 times before I send it to you, or before I send it to my agent, or anyone else to put eyes on it. But I would still be saying that's my first draft, because I haven't completed it. Whenever I'm not happy for someone else to lay eyes on it, that's still first draft to me. But it doesn't mean that it's, that I haven't gone back over it. I do research. Strangely similar to you. So there you go. Do something the same.
We do have something.
I do have the little brackets in there, or I write in Word, not in Scrivener. So because I'm a dinosaur and shall never move from Word, and if they ever take it away from me, I will be desperate. I do, because I can't. My brain doesn't operate well enough for Scrivener to make sense to me. But so I just I write in review mode, and I write comments in the side. So I'll highlight, and often I'll make stuff up that will work for me. Like, I might not know, like I'll say such and such cafe, and then highlight it. Like, so for instance, when I was writing Shirley, a lot of it was set in Geelong in the 1960s and 70s. And so at one point, I mean, this is just a tiny little detail, but it's something I can remember for an example. I had Frank and Shirley go to Coles Cafeteria for lunch. And but then I had to go back. I highlighted that and said, was there a Coles Cafeteria in Geelong at that time? And would you believe it? There was not. And it was like, it opened like 3 months after my time. So annoying. And I couldn't find. I had this, because I'd gone to that Coles Cafeteria as a child, and I had it really clear. I could picture that image in my head, and so I wanted something similar. Anyway, it took me ages to find. I think I ended up making up a cafe, which was not. I really didn't want to. I wanted to find it, because one of the things that people have loved, people from Geelong and this area, one of the things that they've really enjoyed about the book is reading those historical chapters and finding those little tidbits in it about, the Valley Mill, which existed, and those type of things. But I will do, like, I might write. So what I'm saying is, I might write something in that I'm not sure is historically accurate, or I'm not sure. I say it's a legal thing. I'm not sure. I want the law to work that way, but I'm not sure if it actually does. But I'm not going to stop for the sake of the story and spend days researching that. I just figure that I'll make that work later. So I'll write it in hard. So in my second draft, so not second draft, second go over before I suppose it is a second draft. I get to the end, and I read. The first thing I do is set it aside for a few days, then get it back and reread it. And in the second reading, what I'm doing is I'm looking. Basically, does the story make sense? I'm just looking mainly for plot. But go through and fix those, and then I start picking out those things that I've highlighted in the sidebar to say, you need to find out more about this, and that's when I start sort of doing my research. So it's not I can't even really describe the process properly, because it's not linear. It's not like I kind of do, and it might depend on mood, as you say. I might think, I'm really keen to find out more about this today, or it's a sunny day, this would be a good time to go and look at that beach and see what landmarks are around it or whatever. So I kind of pick out the things that I'm interested in doing. But it can take me that stage from the end until I'm ready to show it to you or to somebody else. Sometimes minimum it will be weeks, but sometimes it could be months, or I'm, depending on how much time I've got, depends on if I've got a deadline or not. But it could be, it'll be minimum of 2 or 3 weeks, and multiple goes, like every day, just starting, reading it through, going through stuff, and then it goes off to someone else, and then I get feedback. So, but the structure thing, it takes more, like I kind of make up my mind on the structure. This is funny because I write so, for want of a better word, organically, but I'm actually sort of set up the structure right at the beginning rather than just writing in scenes. So if I will write, I will know that chapter 1 is in Dolly's point of view and that chapter 2 is in Jane's point of view. And I usually, unless I've got this book's kind of not going to work like that. But if I've got 2 point of views, I generally alternate points of view and don't deviate from that. So I'll whatever that structure is going to be, if it's alternating points of view or 2 chapters from one point of view and then a 3rd chapter from someone else or whatever, I set that up at the beginning and I generally don't deviate from that. So I don't, in the next draft, usually have to spend time fiddling with that so much.
How interesting. So that's one way where you're quite structured, whereas I'm much more like sometimes need to just be, you know, I might have that's why Scrivener works for me, because I'll be moving great big chunks, and it's not that I'm moving a scene from the beginning to the end. They're kind of in the same order that they were in the outline. It's just that I might need someone's point of view to come a little bit earlier or later, or, you know, I might be compressing several scenes in the one point of view into one chapter. So, you know, I'm moving bits and around. So how fast, I think this just really rams home to me that there is no right way to do it. Like we are so different, you know, but we both have areas where we're quite rigid and areas where we are just like slapping paint on the wall and hoping it sticks.
And probably if we talk to other people, you know, that you know, for as many authors as there are, there's probably you know, so many different methods, we'll probably find that everybody is, you know, quite unique in the way that they so, you know, there really is no one right way to do it, I don't think, anyway.
No, I think you're right. Hey, Lisa, you just give me an idea. I reckon between you and me, we probably know a few dozen authors. Maybe we could talk to some of them and have a conversation like this. Would you be interested in doing that? And we could
bombard people and, you know, grill them, get some good ideas. Maybe I'll refine my process by picking the brains of
maybe I'll learn not to override.
Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, if only. Okay.
That's an idea. Let's investigate that. So watch this space, people, where we take Australian authors and grill them for all their good ideas. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, well, this has been lovely. Thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah, we could, you know, this is really good. We can waffle for, how long has it been? Do you know?
It has been 37 minutes.
Wow, we really can waffle on, can't we? Anyway, oh well, I hope that people listening in today have had, you know, get something out of it. Hopefully, if they get nothing else out of it, maybe they'll get out of it that there isn't a right way to do it, and that, you know, whatever you're doing is okay.
That can be our log line for this chat. There's no right way.
Whatever, there's no right way to do it. We're evidence of this.
And if you're watching this and you are an aspiring writer, make sure you go find Lisa's Mentoring Mondays. Is that right?
Mentor Monday on my YouTube channel. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for chatting with me. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
See ya.